The scent of ash and pine cut through my lungs as I stumbled through the forest, my bare feet snagging on roots and sharp stones. The autumn wind bit into my skin, though the chill had long since become part of me. Omegas always carried the cold, especially after being tossed aside like unwanted scraps. My thin, worn dress clung to me still damp from when Naira, the pack's cruelest female, accidentally shoved me into the stream during morning assembly. I touched the small, silver pendant around my neck, my mother's last gift before she died. The crescent moon carved into its surface was almost rubbed smooth after years of my fingers tracing it for comfort. Even in the darkest night, the moon still watches over you, she used to whisper. It was all I had left of her, and the only thing I managed to grab when they gave me 2 hours to leave the pack house. The rejection had been swift, merciless. I'd always known I didn't belong, not even among Omegas. Too quiet, too curious, too unwilling to bow. The official reason was incompatibility with pack harmony. But everyone knew the truth. Omegas were meant to obey, not think. And I thought too much. Now my home was a lonely cabin at the far edge of Stone Creek territory, technically within pack borders, but far enough that no one would have to see me. Alpha Darius had called it mercy when he allowed me to stay, his voice cold as stone, while Ceres, his mate, smirked behind him. It wasn't mercy, it was law. The pack couldn't banish a wolf born among them without cause, and discomfort wasn't cause enough. I paused, nostrils flaring. Something was wrong. The forest's usual scents, earth, moss, pine, were laced with something harsh, dangerous. Smoke. My heart slammed against my ribs as I broke into a run. Fire didn't care who you were, Omega or Alpha Wolf or human. Every wolf was bound by duty to protect the territory from flame, even an outcast. The smoke thickened, clawing at my throat, burning my eyes. Then through the crackle of fire came a sound that froze my blood. A child's scream. I sprinted toward it, crashing through a wall of branches until I stumbled into a clearing. At its center, an old woodsman's hut was engulfed in flames, smoke pouring from every opening. The cry came again, small, terrified. Without hesitation, I ran toward the blaze. The heat struck like a wall, searing my lungs. A fallen beam blocked the doorway, but my small frame let me squeeze through the gap and into the inferno. Inside, the smoke was thick as tar. I dropped to my hands and knees, crawling toward the sobs echoing from the back. My lungs screamed for air, my vision blurred, but I kept moving until I found him, a little boy curled in a corner, no more than 3. Dark hair, green eyes. I knew that face. Ash, the Alpha's son. The future heir of Stone Creek. "I've got you," I whispered, reaching for him. "Come here, little one." He shrank back, trembling. "Hot," he whimpered. "Scary." I know, I soothed, forcing my voice steady while the ceiling groaned above us. "But I'm going to get you out, okay? We just have to be brave." A beam crashed behind me, sparks raining down. Time was running out. "Do you know who I am?" I asked. He nodded, soot streaking his cheeks. "The quiet lady. Daddy says you're different." A faint, bitter smile touched my lips. "That's right. And being different is going to save you today. But you have to trust me." Ash hesitated, then threw himself into my arms, clinging tight. I wrapped him close, tore off my shawl, and covered his head. "Keep this over your mouth and nose," I said. "And don't open your eyes until I say so." The way back felt twice as long. The fire roared louder, hotter. A burning rafter crashed down, grazing my shoulder. Pain tore through me, but I bit back a scream. He couldn't hear me break. Not when his life depended on me. One arm held the child tight against me, the other groped blindly through the smoke-choked dark. When we finally burst through the doorway into the crisp forest air, I dragged in a breath so deep it felt like my lungs might tear. Ash coughed weakly against my chest, but he was breathing. He was alive. I didn't stop running until the roar of the flames softened behind us. Only then did I lower him onto a fallen log, easing the shawl from his face. "You can open your eyes now," I murmured. His bright green eyes, so much like his father's, blinked up at me, still frightened, yet full of wonder. "You saved me," he whispered, as if it didn't seem real. I nodded, wincing as the burn on my shoulder screamed for attention. My throat felt raw when I asked, "What were you doing out here alone?" "Ash, this is far from the pack house." He frowned, eyes wet. "I was playing hide and seek with Mommy's friend. He told me to count to 100. And then he was gone." A chill stabbed through me. Someone had left the Alpha's son alone in a rotting shelter ready to ignite. That wasn't an accident. That was intent. Before I could speak, a long howl split the forest, the sentry's alarm. They'd spotted the fire. Within minutes, the clearing would swarm with wolves. "Ash, listen to me," I said urgently, crouching so we were eye level. "When your father comes, you have to tell him everything, the man who left you here, the game, all of it. Can you do that?" He nodded solemnly, his small hand reaching for mine. The touch, so innocent, so trusting, tightened something deep in my chest. He didn't see an outcast Omega. He saw the one who had pulled him from the fire. The pounding of feet grew closer. I stood quickly, instinct forcing me to step back. Protocol demanded distance, especially between an Omega and the Alpha's family. But as I started to move away, Ash clung to my hand. "Stay," he pleaded, voice trembling. "I'm scared." How could I deny him? I sank beside him again, his tiny fingers gripping mine as the first figures broke through the trees. Jax Ronan and Cade, the pack's enforcers, took in the scene, the burning shelter, the soot-covered Omega, and the Alpha's son pressed against her side. Then he came. Alpha Kael Draven tore through the tree line like a storm, every movement radiating authority and fear. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his dark hair wild from the run, those same fierce green eyes blazing. "Ash!" His voice was a thunderclap. The boy released me and ran to him. Kael dropped to one knee, sweeping his son into his arms, clutching him so tightly I could almost feel the tremor in his hands. "Daddy," Ash gasped. "The lady saved me from the hot." Kael's gaze lifted to mine over his son's shoulder. Confusion, and something unreadable flickering there. I dropped my eyes at once, head bowed. I smelled smoke, Alpha. I rasped, throat raw. When I found the source, I heard Ash crying inside. I went in and brought him out. "She saved me," Ash said again, stubborn and certain. Kael's jaw tightened. "You said a man left you there, son." "What man?" Ash began explaining in his halting toddler words about the game of hide and seek. While Kael listened, Ceres, the alpha female, appeared, her elegant face twisting with fear as she checked over her child, and with venom when she looked at me. My task was done. I'd fulfilled my duty to the pack, even if no one wanted to admit an Omega could. I turned quietly, slipping back into the woods, the burn on my shoulder pulsing with every step. The forest that had once felt hostile now seemed to swallow me in its shadows, shielding me from the eyes of those who would rather forget I existed. But I'd only gone a few dozen yards before a deep voice stopped me cold. "Omega, wait!" The alpha command in his tone rooted me to the ground. I turned slowly, head lowered, as Kael Draven approached. Even without meeting his gaze, I felt the weight of it, sharp, assessing, powerful. "You're injured," he said, voice steady but softer now. I touched my shoulder instinctively. "It's nothing, Alpha. Just a burn. You went into a burning house to save my son." It wasn't a question, but a statement thick with disbelief. I nodded anyway, unsure what response he wanted. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush the air from my lungs. When I dared to glance up, Kael Draven was watching me, eyes sharp, calculating, and filled with something I couldn't name. "What's your name?" he asked at last. The question hit like a slap. I'd been born in Stone Creek Pack, lived my whole life within its borders, and yet the Alpha didn't even know my name. I'd always known I was invisible, but hearing it confirmed still hurt. Laravel, I said quietly. Kael gave a single nod like he was carving the name into memory. Report to the pack house tomorrow morning. The pack doctor will treat your injuries. Before I could reply, he turned and strode back into the forest, leaving me standing in the dim light smoke, still curling behind us. Confusion, mixed with unease deep in my gut. Alphas didn't care about rejected Omegas. Not unless something had shifted. Something had. As I walked back to my lonely cabin, my mother's silver pendant pressed cold against my skin. Even in your darkest night, the moon still watches, she used to whisper. That night, it felt like the moon had seen everything. Sleep never came. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in that fire. The blistering heat, the choking smoke, the child's terrified scream. By dawn, I was trembling and exhausted. My shoulder throbbed where the burn had worsened overnight, angry red blisters spreading along pale skin. The cracked mirror above my sink didn't soften the truth. I looked wrecked. Soot still clung to my tangled blonde hair despite washing in rusty water. Dark shadows hollowed my eyes, and the dress I pulled on, a faded blue one that had belonged to my mother, hung loose on my frame. The Alpha had commanded me to come. That word alone knotted my stomach. 6 months had passed since my rejection, and now for the first time I was being summoned back to the center of pack life. Nothing good ever came from an Omega being called to the Alpha's house. The walk took an hour. Every step stirred memories, the long years of servitude, the quiet ways I tried to be useful the moment I realized that no amount of obedience would ever make me belong. Then the day of my rejection came flooding back. Pack harmony requires balance, Alpha Darius had said. And you, Lyra, create disharmony simply by existing. Beside him, his son Kael had stood silent, newly returned from forging alliances with other packs. His eyes had been cold and distant while his father pronounced judgment. I'd wondered then if he might be different, but his silence had been all the answer I needed. Now he was Alpha, and I was still the girl he'd watched be cast out. By the time the great log structure of the Stone Creek pack house came into view, my heart was beating so loud it drowned the bird song. The building loomed like a relic of power, warm lights, tall timbers, guarded doors. 2 enforcers stood watch Ronan and Cade. Their eyes widened slightly as I approached the Omega ghost they'd long forgotten. Alpha Kael ordered me to see the doctor, I said softly. They exchanged looks before one gave a curt nod. Through the main hall left corridor, straight to the infirmary. Don't linger. I wouldn't dream of it. Inside, the pack house smelled of cedar coffee and authority. The main hall was quiet this early. Most wolves would be in the dining room. My footsteps echoed as I slipped down the corridor, keeping my head low, praying not to cross anyone's path. The infirmary door creaked open to reveal Orin, the pack's doctor. A beta wolf, older and kind-eyed. He looked up from his desk and blinked in surprise. Laravel, he said, recognition softening his tone. I heard what you did yesterday. Brave thing to do. I shifted awkwardly under his praise. I just did what anyone would have done. Orin shook his head with a faint smile and a motion for me to sit on the exam table. Not everyone would have run into a burning house child. Let's take a look at that shoulder. Not everyone would run into a burning house, Orin murmured carefully, unwrapping the bandage on my shoulder. Let me see that. His hands were gentle, practiced. The cooling salve he spread over my skin stung at first, then eased the fire beneath. As he worked, he talked small updates, bits of pack gossip, whispers from the heart of Stone Creek that I hadn't heard in months. I drank in every word, pretending indifference, while secretly starving for the sound of familiar names and places. There, he said, finally stepping back with a satisfied nod. That should heal cleanly. You were lucky, Lyra. Could have been far worse. Before I could answer, the door swung open. I didn't have to look to know who it was. Oren's posture stiffened and my wolf recoiled instinctively. "Leave us," came the deep, commanding voice. Oren inclined his head and slipped out without protest, closing the door behind him. I stayed perched on the edge of the table, fingers clutching the fabric of my dress, eyes fixed on my scuffed boots. Then Kael Draven stepped into my line of sight, his presence consuming the room. He wore dark jeans and a black shirt that clung to the powerful build beneath. He didn't need a uniform to look like an alpha. His authority was a living, breathing thing. "You're healing," he said, voice unreadable. "Yes, Alpha," I replied, surprised at how steady I sounded. A low hum left his throat, non-committal, but his silence stretched heavy and deliberate. I could feel him watching me, measuring every breath. Finally, unable to bear it, I whispered, "If that's all, Alpha, I'll return to my cabin." I slid off the table, keeping my gaze low. "I've spoken to my son," he said suddenly. "Ash told me what happened." I froze. "He said you saved his life." I swallowed hard. "Anyone would have." "No," Kael cut me off, voice sharp. "Anyone would not have." When my enforcers arrived, the shelter was fully engulfed. They deemed it too dangerous to enter. His tone darkened, edged with something close to disbelief. "And yet you, a rejected Omega, went in alone." I lifted my chin a fraction. I heard a child crying. Nothing else mattered. Something flickered across his expression, gone too fast to read. "Ash also mentioned a man," he said, eyes narrowing. "A game of hide and seek." My head snapped up. "Has he been found?" "The one who left him." Our eyes met, and for one raw heartbeat, I forgot to look away. His gaze, sharp green and burning, held mine without anger, almost like curiosity. "Not yet," Kael said quietly, "but we will find him." "This was no accident, Lara. Someone put my son in danger intentionally." The sound of my name in his mouth sent an unexpected tremor through me. I lowered my eyes again, pulse racing. Then his voice softened, almost hesitant. "Ash has been asking for you." I blinked. "For me, he wants to thank his rescuer properly. That's not necessary." "Alpha." "It's not a request," he interrupted. Calm but firm. "You'll join us for dinner tonight. 7 o'clock. Someone will escort you." I stared, stunned. "Dinner. With the Alpha family." Kael's eyes didn't waver. 7. Before I could form words, the door opened again, and the air in the room shifted. Saris Draven stood in the doorway, poised and perfect, every inch the former Alpha female. Her expression was cool as polished marble eyes sliding right past me. "Kael," she said smoothly, "the council has arrived for your meeting." "Thank you, Mother." Kael replied, his tone formal now. "I'll join them shortly." Only then did her gaze flick toward me, sharp and dismissive. "What is she doing here?" "Lyra saved Ash's life," Kael said simply. "She was injured in the process." "How fortunate," Saris drawled. "An Omega just happened to be wandering near a fire that nearly killed my grandson." One might think the timing was convenient. I flinched at her insinuation, but Kael's reply came low and lethal. One might also think, he said, voice cold as steel, that accusing the wolf who risked her life to save your grandson is a dangerous mistake. "Is that what you're suggesting?" Mother, a crack appeared in Cerise's perfect composure before she smoothed it over with a brittle smile. "Of course not," she said softly. "I'm merely noting the coincidence." "There are no coincidences when it comes to attempts on my son's life," Kael Draven said evenly, his tone like a blade's edge. "Now, if you'll excuse us." I was in the middle of a private conversation with Lyra. The dismissal landed like a command. Saris's green eyes narrowed, her lips pressed into a sharp line, but she inclined her head and withdrew, shutting the door just a bit too hard behind her. When the echo faded, I finally exhaled the breath I'd been holding. "Your mother doesn't want me at dinner," I murmured. She doesn't make those decisions anymore, Kael replied simply. He paused at the door, glancing back at me with an unreadable expression. 7 o'clock, Lyra. Don't make me send enforcers to fetch you. Then he was gone, leaving the infirmary feeling larger and emptier than before. I moved through the pack house in a haze, ignoring the looks that followed me. Whispers always traveled fast in Stone Creek, and by now, every wolf knew the outcast Omega had saved the Alpha's heir. Their faces said everything: suspicion, confusion, resentment. To them, I wasn't a hero. I was a disturbance in their hierarchy, a reminder that even an Omega could defy expectations. Outside, the cold autumn wind cut through the fog of tension clinging to me. I took it as a blessing and quickened my steps toward my small cabin, craving the safety of solitude. But when I arrived, I froze. 3 women leaned against my porch railing like they owned it. Nira and 2 of her usual shadows, all high-ranking females with smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Well, look who decided to crawl back, Nira drawled. Our little hero. I tried to brush past them. I just want to get to my door. Of course you do, she purred, stepping into my path. At 27, she was older, taller, sharper, her beauty as polished as the cruelty in her voice. Tell me something, Lyra. How did you happen to know where the Alpha's son was? Quite the coincidence, isn't it? You all alone wandering near a fire. The echo of Ceres's insinuation twisted my stomach. I smelled smoke and followed it. That's all. Nira's lips curled. Psst. That's all she mimicked, then smirked. And now you're invited to dine with the Alpha himself. Not bad for a reject, huh? One of her companions, Sarah. I recognized the scent snickered. Maybe she's hoping to replace Arya. The name hit like a slap. Everyone knew about Arya, the elegant beta from the Silver Lake Pack, practically promised to Kael. A political bond, strong bloodlines, perfect manners, a power move. Nira laughed darkly. An Omega replacing a beta. Don't make me laugh. She's probably just being questioned as a suspect. I saved his son. I said the words escaping before I could stop them. I would never harm a child. Her smile turned predatory. She stepped closer, her shadow falling over me. Listen carefully, little Omega. Whatever you think you're gaining from this hero act, it won't last. You were rejected for a reason. You don't belong here, and you never will. Her hand darted out, fingers curling around my pendant. I gasped as she yanked hard. The chain snapped, biting into my neck. Pretty thing, she said, dangling it just out of reach. A keepsake. Please, I whispered, all the fight draining out of me. It was my mother's. A cruel light danced in her eyes as she tossed it to one of the others. Then maybe we should keep it safe. Omegas tend to lose things. I lunged before thinking, desperate to grab it, but Nira shoved me hard. Pain exploded in my burned shoulder as I hit the porch railing. Careful, she said mockingly. Wouldn't want the Alpha's dinner guest to show up bruised. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. What's going on here? The voice cut through the tension like a growl of thunder. All 4 of us turned. Standing at the edge of the clearing was Riven, the Alpha's second in command. His tall frame and quiet authority were enough to still the air. Nira straightened, instantly plastering on a false smile. Just welcoming Lyra back, she said smoothly. We heard about her bravery. Riven's dark eyes swept over the group, reading every unspoken truth in our stances. Is that so? He asked. Then extending his hand toward Nira's companion, he added calmly, Then you won't mind returning what you took. The woman hesitated, but under his stare she dropped my pendant into his palm with a brittle laugh. Just admiring it. I'm sure, Riven said dryly, his voice laced with quiet authority. Now, as I recall, the Alpha scheduled combat drills for all enforcers and senior pack members. That includes you 3. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a dismissal. Naira's jaw tightened, but she knew better than to challenge him. She shot me one last cutting look, her voice dripping with venom. "See you at dinner, Lyra." Then she turned and stalked off with Sarah and the other woman in tow, their laughter fading into the woods. When they were gone, Riven approached, holding something out to me. My mother's pendant. The chain was broken, but the crescent moon itself glimmered in his palm, untouched by their cruelty. "Thank you," I whispered, taking it carefully. My fingers curling around the cool silver, like it was life itself. He studied me quietly, eyes dark and assessing. "Are you all right?" I nodded, though my shoulder ached and humiliation still burned hot under my skin. "The Alpha asked me to tell you that dinner's been moved to 8. He said, his tone firm, but not unkind. And he wanted to make sure you had suitable attire." I blinked. "Suitable attire?" The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. His words, not mine. "There's a package waiting for you inside your cabin." He tilted his head toward the door. "I'll be back at 7:30 to escort you." He turned to leave, then hesitated. "What you did for Ash running into that fire was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish." "Is there really a difference?" I asked quietly. For the first time, Riven's stoic mask cracked. A hint of amusement softened his expression. "Maybe not," he said. "But either way, you've caught the Alpha's attention. That's rarely a comfortable place to be." With that, he disappeared into the trees, leaving me standing there, clutching my broken pendant, my pulse uneven. Inside my cabin, the promise of suitable attire waited on my bed, a large box wrapped in brown paper, tied neatly with string. My heart pounded as I unwrapped it, half afraid of what I might find. Inside, nestled in folds of tissue, was a dress of deep emerald silk, the color of pine shadows, the color of Kael Draven's eyes. I lifted it carefully. The fabric whispered between my fingers, smooth and cool, like running water. Simple, elegant long sleeves, a modest neckline, and a skirt that flowed like it was made to move with me. Beside it lay a small velvet box. When I opened it, I found a new silver chain, stronger, finer, gleaming faintly in the light. A replacement for the one Naira had snapped. My breath caught. This wasn't a loan. This was a gift. Alphas didn't give gifts to Omegas, especially not rejected ones. What game was Kael Draven playing? With trembling hands, I slid my mother's crescent pendant onto the new chain and clasped it around my neck. Then I slipped into the green dress. It fit perfectly, like it had been tailored for me. Maybe it had. The thought sent a strange thrill through my chest, half excitement, half dread. At precisely 7:30, a knock sounded at my door. When I opened it, Riven stood there. His gaze flicked over me, and for a brief second his composure faltered. "You clean up well, Omega," he said, voice gruff but genuine. The walk to the pack house was silent tension, coiling tighter with every step. Wolves we passed stared openly, whispers chasing in our wake. By the time we reached the Alpha's private quarters, my nerves were stretched thin as wire. Riven knocked once, then opened the heavy wooden door, and gestured me inside. "Good luck," he murmured under his breath. The Alpha's dining room wasn't what I expected. It wasn't grand or ceremonial. It was warm, intimate fire crackling in the stone hearth shelves of old books instead of the usual mounted trophies. A round table sat at the center set for 4. Lyra. The small voice hit me first, then the weight of tiny arms wrapping around my legs. Ash looked up at me, his smile wide and pure. "You came." I knelt, unable to help the smile tugging at my lips. "Of course I did. How are you feeling?" "I'm okay. Daddy says I was very brave." He paused, brow furrowing seriously. "You were brave too. You saved me from the hot." "The hot almost got both of us," I teased, gently tapping his nose. "But we were faster. Remember?" He nodded solemnly, then his face brightened again. "Daddy, look." Lyra's here and she's pretty. I straightened quickly, heart jumping as I turned. Kael Draven stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. He'd changed into dark slacks and a fitted black shirt, the firelight glinting against the sharp lines of his face. Power rolled off him in quiet waves, commanding the space without a single word. And for the first time since the fire, our eyes met and held. Without the watchful eyes of the pack, Kael Draven seemed almost human, though no less commanding. "So she is," he said quietly, his gaze catching mine for a brief, charged moment before the air shifted again. A woman entered from the side door, not Ceres as I half feared, but Leora, the housekeeper. She carried a tray laden with food, her eyes flicking curiously toward me before she set it on the table and slipped away. "Sit," Kael said, gesturing to the chair beside Ash. "We're keeping things simple tonight for his sake." The dinner unfolded like a strange, hazy dream. Ash chattered the entire time, telling stories with the reckless joy only children possess, oblivious to the tension threading through the room. Kael occasionally asked about my shoulder, my cabin, my recovery questions. I answered as briefly as I could. Then dessert arrived, honey cakes that made Ash squeal with delight. Kael's tone softened. "Ash," he said gently, "it's time for your bath. Leora's waiting." The boy pouted but obeyed, giving me a sticky-fingered hug before scampering out. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and silence fell like a thick curtain. Kael poured 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter and handed one to me. Instead of returning to the head of the table, he took the chair beside mine. "Why did you save him?" he asked abruptly. I blinked, startled. "Because he needed saving." "You risked your life for the son of the Alpha who rejected you." "I risked my life for a child," I corrected softly. His title didn't matter. Kael studied me intently, as if dissecting something unseen. "You know there are members of the pack who believe you had something to do with what happened?" My fingers tightened around my glass. "Like your mother." A faint flicker crossed his expression, surprise, maybe even amusement, among others. "Why would I save him if I meant him harm, to win favor?" he said flatly. "To appear the hero." He wasn't accusing, he was testing, waiting, measuring my reaction. "If I wanted to win favor," I said, unable to hide the edge in my voice, "there are easier ways than setting a fire and running into it." To my astonishment, his lips curved slightly. "Fair point." He stood moving toward the fireplace, the light painting his profile in golden shadow. "Do you know why you were rejected, Lyra?" The question hit like a strike to the chest. "I was told I caused disharmony." "Do you believe that was the real reason?" I hesitated. It felt like a trap, but something about his tone made me answer. "It's not my place to question the Alpha's judgment." "It was my father's judgment," he corrected, turning to face me. "I'm asking for yours." I took a breath. I think I asked too many questions. I didn't fit neatly into the box Omegas are expected to live in. I was supposed to serve quietly and keep my head down. I wasn't good at that. Kael's eyes darkened. My father believed in strict hierarchy, power above compassion. "And you don't," the words slipped out before I could stop them. Speaking so directly to an Alpha could have been seen as defiance, but Kael didn't rebuke me. "I believe a pack's strength comes from the abilities of all its wolves," he said. "Not just those at the top." He paused, gaze steady. "And I believe you've been underestimated, Lyra Vale." The words knocked the air from my lungs. Before I could respond, his tone shifted calmer but heavier. "Someone tried to kill my son," he said bluntly. "The man who left him in that cabin wasn't acting alone." "Who would hurt a child?" I whispered. "Someone trying to hurt me," Kael replied grimly. "Or the pack itself. Take your pick." He set his glass down, the firelight flickering across his face. "Since becoming Alpha, I've made changes, modernized the laws, softened the hierarchy. Some wolves see that as weakness. Like your mother," I said before I could stop myself. He didn't deny it. "Ceres believes in my father's system, absolute control, no dissent. She thought I was insane when I proposed reviewing the rejection records from his time as Alpha. I froze, reviewing them. Kael nodded slowly. I think some wolves were exiled, not because they failed the pack, but because they threatened my father's vision of obedience. His voice lowered, rich with conviction. I've been searching for those who were cast out unjustly. I hadn't reached your case yet. My heart pounded. Are you saying you would have reversed it based on what I've seen of you? He met my gaze squarely. Yes. Then he leaned forward, his tone dropping to something deeper, more deliberate. And that brings me to why I asked you here tonight. Not just to satisfy Ash's wish to thank you. Kael Draven said, his tone quiet, but firm. Then, why? My voice sounded strange, caught somewhere between curiosity and fear. Because I need someone I can trust, he said simply. And you, Lyra, are perhaps the only wolf in this pack who's proven that loyalty isn't just a word. You saved my son when it would have been safer, smarter, even to let him die. I flinched at the bluntness of his words. I need your help, he continued. Someone who can see what others miss, move unnoticed. Someone who knows what it's like to be invisible and still act with courage. Someone who ran into fire when everyone else stood still. You want me to spy for you? I asked, disbelief bleeding into my voice. I want you to help me protect my son. And this pack, he corrected. In return, I'll restore your status. You'd be part of this pack again, under my protection, no longer an outcast. I just stared at him, my thoughts spinning. Why would anyone listen to me? I'm nothing here. That he said softly is exactly why they'll never suspect you. The mantel clock chimed 9 sharp in the silence. Kael straightened, something like regret flickering across his expression. Think about it. You don't need to decide tonight. But I already knew. Despite everything, the rejection, the whispers, the scars, I couldn't ignore what I'd seen. A child had almost died because of the pack's politics. I knew what it was like to be powerless, to be treated as expendable. I wouldn't let that happen to him. I'll help, I said quietly, but not for status, for Ash. Something shifted in his eyes, respect, or maybe surprise. Then we begin tomorrow, he said. Noon, the pack house. When Riven escorted me back through the forest that night, the hem of the emerald dress brushing against my legs, I knew there was no turning back. I had made a choice that bound me to the Alpha against enemies hidden in the shadows, wolves willing to kill a child to wound their leader. I touched the crescent pendant at my throat, drawing strength from its familiar weight. The moon still watches, I whispered to myself, even on the darkest night. And I knew that night was only beginning. The next day I arrived at the pack house, right at noon. My simple clothes felt grounding after the silk of last night's dress, but the new silver chain stayed at my neck. It had become my armor. The enforcers at the gate greeted me with curt nods. This time they didn't sneer. One of them led me down a long corridor to a small office tucked behind the east wing. Inside sat Riven, surrounded by stacks of files. He looked up briefly. Right on time, he said, motioning for me to sit. The Alpha will join us soon. He's dealing with an unexpected visitor. I lowered myself into the chair, curiosity gnawing at me. What is this place? Security records, he said, scanning a page. Incident reports, border breaches, anything that threatens pack safety. Before I could respond, the door opened. Kael stepped in, his expression sharp tension, simmering beneath his calm exterior. And behind him came a woman I recognized instantly, even though we'd never met. Arya Blackwell, Beta of the Silver Lake Pack, daughter of Alpha Corvin. The woman every rumor claimed would soon become Kael's mate. Tall, composed, striking. Her dark hair gleamed, her confidence almost tangible. Her eyes moved over the room, assessing, and then landed on me. This is her, she asked Kael, the Omega who saved Ash. I lowered my gaze out of habit, but caught the faint irritation crossing Kael's face. Lyra, he said, this is Arya Blackwell, daughter of Alpha Corvin from Silver Lake. Arya, this is Lyra Vale. To my surprise, Arya approached and extended her hand. I wanted to thank you personally, she said. What you did was extraordinary. I hesitated before taking her hand. Anyone would have done the same. No, she said firmly. They wouldn't have. Kael told me the shelter was fully engulfed when his enforcers arrived. None of them dared to enter. Her warm brown eyes held genuine gratitude. Ash means a great deal to all of us. Something twisted inside my chest at those words, the way she said us. The reminder of where she stood in Kael's life and where I didn't. I pushed the feeling away. She was the perfect choice for him, strong-poised, everything a beta and an alpha's mate should be. Kael's voice broke through my thoughts. Arya's here because her pack has faced something similar, he said grimly. She may have information that connects to what happened to my son. Arya's expression shifted, her composure hardening. 2 months ago, she began our Alpha's youngest daughter nearly drowned during a supervised swim. The wolf responsible vanished before anyone could question him. You think that's connected? I asked, my pulse quickening. 3 neighboring packs, Riven said grimly. 3 attacks, each one aimed at an Alpha's family. The third was the Blue Mountain pack. He continued. Alpha's son was poisoned with wolfsbane last month. He lived but barely. I frowned. But why? What could anyone gain from hurting children? Destabilization, Kael Draven said flatly. Stone Creek, Silver Lake, and Blue Mountain have all been working together to modernize pack law to make it more balanced. Not everyone welcomes that kind of progress. The old guard, Riven added. Traditionalists who want things to stay the way they were, isolated, packs rigid hierarchies, and alpha rule without question. A chill crept down my spine. Kael had mentioned before that his mother disapproved of his reforms, but could Cerys truly be involved in something this dark? I couldn't bring myself to ask. Arya, however, had no such hesitation. You suspect your mother? She said bluntly. Kael's jaw tightened. I suspect everyone until they're proven innocent. My son's life is on the line. I swallowed hard. What can I do? I'm just an Omega. No one tells me anything. That Kael said, his tone soft but sharp as glass, is exactly why you're valuable. You can go where others can't. Hear what others ignore. People speak freely around those they think don't matter. The truth of it stung, but I nodded. There's something else, Riven said, sliding a folder toward me. Inside was a photograph of a charred scrap of fabric, what looked like a scarf, or maybe a bandana. On it 3 jagged slashes in deep, dried red. What is that? I asked, my stomach turning. The mark of the red claw, Arya said darkly. A secret faction of traditionalists. They believe wolves should return to the old ways. No human ties, no modernization. Absolute submission to alpha power. They've always been rumors, Riven added. Whispers around campfires, but lately they've gone from shadows to blood on the ground. Kael's voice hardened. They're not just targeting leaders. Now they're targeting our children. My blood ran cold. You think the person who left Ash in that burning shelter was one of them? Kael nodded once. We know they've infiltrated several packs. What we don't know is who's working for them inside ours. His gaze found mine sharp and unwavering. That's where you come in, Lyra. We need eyes and ears where ours can't reach. Your rejection, it actually makes you perfect for this. You want me to act like I've been reinstated? I asked slowly. Kael's mouth curved into the faintest smile, the first I'd ever seen from him. Not act. As of this morning, your rejection has been reversed. The words hit me like thunder. For a moment, I couldn't even speak. Tonight, he continued, the announcement will be made at the pack meeting. You'll return not as an outcast, but as one of us. I stared at him, struggling to breathe. Just like that, he shook his head. Not just for this mission. The decision is permanent. My father's ruling was unjust. I've corrected it. Emotion burned behind my eyes. Thank you, I managed the words trembling on my tongue. Arya studied us both, her gaze thoughtful. If Lyra starts asking questions, she could become a target, she warned. She'll need protection. I've already considered that, Kael said, still watching me, which is why she'll be moving into the pack house, east wing near my quarters. My pulse spiked. I can't possibly. It's already arranged, he interrupted gently but firmly. Riven will help you move this afternoon. Riven gave a small apologetic nod. It was clear this wasn't a request, it was an order. Kael leaned back, his tone deepening. There's something else you need to know. We believe the Red Claw is planning something at next week's Interpack Council meeting. My breath caught. The Council of 12, yes, Arya said softly. All 12 regional alphas will be there, including my father Corvin and Kael. What exactly do you think they're planning? I asked. Kael's gaze burned with quiet fury, something big enough to set the entire werewolf world on fire. That Kael Draven said darkly is exactly what we need to uncover. The meeting ended with clear, precise orders. I was to blend back into pack life, attend gatherings, reconnect, observe, and report directly to Kael or Riven. No one else could know the truth of my mission. Not even the enforcers we passed on our way out. As Riven escorted me through the grand hall, a familiar chill cut through the air. Saris Draven stood midway down the staircase, her gown glinting like frost, her expression sharper than a blade. What she demanded, eyes locking on me with disdain, is she doing here again? Riven straightened, his tone measured but firm. The Alpha has reversed Lyra Vale's rejection. She's been reinstated. For a split second, shock cracked Saris's perfect mask. Then her expression hardened, her voice smooth as venom. Has he indeed, oh, progressive of him? Her gaze slid to me, icy and deliberate. I suppose saving my grandson has earned you quite the reward. It wasn't about earning anything, I said quietly. It was about doing what was right. Something sharp flickered in her eyes. You presume to lecture me on what is right? Omega. This pack has survived 8 generations by honoring hierarchy. Wolves like you questioning disobedient fracture that order. Mother. Kael's voice cut through the hall like a thunderclap. He stepped from the corridor's shadow, his presence alone commanding the space. That's enough. Instantly, Cerese's tone softened, but the cold never left her face. I was merely expressing concern, she said silkily. Your father made careful decisions, Kael. I'd hate to see you undo them so hastily. My father's rejection of Lyra was a mistake, Kael said flatly. I've corrected it. The matter is closed. Of course. Her lips curved in a brittle smile. You're Alpha now. It's your right to experiment with new ideas. Though her eyes flicked toward me, gleaming with malice, I do hope this won't complicate your arrangement with Silver Lake. Her words landed like a stone in my stomach. Arya, I realized silently. His intended mate. His political match. I shouldn't have been surprised, but somehow I still felt the sting. Kael's jaw tightened. My personal arrangements are not open for public discussion, Mother. Of course not, she said smoothly, that knowing smile never faltering as she brushed past. But destiny has a way of correcting missteps. Blood always finds its balance. The moment she disappeared, I exhaled shakily. Kael's expression was thunderous. Get Lyra settled in the East Wing, he told Riven. The Aspen Suite should be ready. Riven blinked. The diplomatic quarters, that's secure, Private Kael interrupted. And no one will question a reinstated wolf being rewarded for saving the future Alpha. With a curt nod, he walked away, leaving me with more questions than I could count. The Aspen Suite was larger than my entire cabin. Soft blues and forest greens, sunlight spilling across polished floors. A sitting area, a balcony overlooking endless pines. It was beautiful and suffocating. "This is too much," I said as Riven helped carry in my small bundle of belongings, worn clothes, a few books, a chipped mug. They looked pitiful against the elegance surrounding me. "Alpha's orders," he said quietly, "and it works. Anyone tied to the Red Claw will assume this is just his way of showing gratitude. It keeps your cover intact." After he left, I stood in the silence, surrounded by luxury that didn't feel like mine. In less than 2 days, my world had shifted completely outcast to trusted operative, invisible to vital. As I unpacked my fingers, brushed the emerald silk of the dress Kael had given me, I lifted it, inhaling faint traces of pine and smoke his scent. My heart skipped warmth, blooming where it shouldn't. I quickly folded it away. Foolish thoughts. Kael Draven was an alpha, an engaged alpha. Whatever kindness he showed was strategy, not sentiment. Still, as I stood by the window, the scent of the forest mingling with memory, I couldn't quiet the flutter beneath my ribs or the fear that somewhere deep inside something had already begun to change. A sharp knock jolted me from my thoughts. When I opened the door, Ash stood there, grinning from ear to ear, with Lyra, his ever-patient nanny, hovering behind him. "Lyra," he squealed. "Daddy says you're staying with us now. Can you read me a story? Please, please, please." Lyra gave me an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry." He insisted once he heard you'd moved into the pack house. "It's all right," I said, unable to resist Ash's excitement. "I'd love to." Moments later, we were settled by the window, the child curled against my side as I read from his favorite book. His little heartbeat thudded against mine, warm and trusting. As his small fingers turned the pages, I couldn't shake the thought that my life had taken a turn I never could have predicted. An outcast turned into the Alpha Son's bedtime storyteller. What I didn't realize then was that the real story, the one I'd stumbled into, was far more dangerous than anything printed on those pages. The next week blurred by in motion and unease. Outwardly, I played my part, the reinstated Omega who'd earned the Alpha's favor. Privately, I listened, observed, gathered whispers. The pack's reactions varied. Some greeted me with cautious curiosity, others with thinly veiled resentment. Nera and her clique watched me like circling wolves, eyes sharp and calculating, though they dared not touch me now that I lived under Kael's protection. Each night, I met with Kael in his study, a warm, book-filled room where plans took shape over tea that always went cold. I found myself anticipating those meetings more than I should have. He was intense, intelligent, sometimes surprisingly dry in his humor. Sometimes Arya joined us, her insight into neighboring packs invaluable. She and Kael moved in perfect sync, two alphas in spirit, their confidence and familiarity twisting something deep inside me that I refused to name. The Council of 12 meeting loomed closer, but we still had no solid proof of the Red Claw's plot. Only rumors of dissent and hints of rebellion among old guard wolves. Then 3 days before the gathering, everything changed. I was in the garden with Ash playing hide-and-seek among the hedges. His laughter echoed like sunlight, a sound that both warmed and broke my heart. The last time he'd played this game, it had nearly cost him his life. Then voices. Close. I froze, catching Nyra's voice, sharp as glass. "It's happening at the council meeting. All three, Alphas Draven, Blackwell, and Thane. Once they're out of the way, the others will fall in line." A second voice, male, rough and unfamiliar, answered, "And you're certain about your part?" "I know exactly what to do," Nyra replied, her tone cold with conviction. "The Red Claw will rise again. No more of this foolish equality. Ranks exist for a reason." "Good," the man said. "The others are already in position. Don't fail us." Their footsteps faded, splitting in opposite directions. I didn't move for several seconds, my pulse roaring in my ears. Ash clung to me, sensing my tension. "Why are we hiding from Miss Nyra?" he whispered, his voice trembling. I forced a smile. "It's still part of our game, sweetheart. But now—" I knelt, meeting his bright eyes. We need to find your daddy. Quickly. We found Kael in the middle of an enforcer briefing. The moment he saw my face, Ash's small hand gripping mine, he dismissed everyone except Riven. Naira is part of the Red Claw, I said without preamble. I overheard her. She's planning something at the council. They're targeting you, Corvin and Thane. Kael's eyes hardened the air around him, tightening like a storm about to break. I repeated the conversation word for word. When I finished, he crouched beside Ash, his voice calm but commanding. Ash, I need you to go with Riven for a bit. Stay close to him, all right? Ash nodded solemnly and left with Riven, the door closing softly behind them. Kael turned back to me, all warmth gone from his eyes. We move now, he said, before they realize we know. He crossed the room in 2 strides, unlocking a cabinet filled with maps and sealed folders. The council meeting will be held on Silver Lake territory. We'll coordinate with Arya's security detail. What about Nira? I asked. Shouldn't we arrest her before she disappears? Kael shook his head. Not yet. If we move too soon, the others will scatter. She said the rest are already in position. We need to catch all of them. And in that moment, staring at the fire of determination in his eyes, I realized this was no longer just about loyalty to the pack. This was war, and we were already in the middle of it. There are conspirators across several packs, Kael said grimly, his voice low but sharp. Or maybe more than one inside ours. Which brings me to a hard question, Lyra. He fixed those piercing green eyes on me. Did you recognize the male voice? I froze, feeling the weight of what he wasn't saying. You're asking if it might have been someone close to me, someone who knows our security codes. He didn't answer, but the tension in his jaw told me enough. It wasn't Riven, I said firmly. The voice was older, rougher, but I can't place it. Relief flickered in Kael's eyes for just a heartbeat before his usual iron control returned. Then we set a trap, he said. Let them think their plan is still on track, but we'll be ready when they strike. For 2 days we barely slept. We mapped strategies, trusted only a handful, Jax, Ronan, and Cade among them. Arya arrived with her father's head of security, and together they pored over maps and contingency plans. Through it all, I kept a watchful eye on Naira, her comings-goings whispers in the corridors. She acted perfectly normal, even confident, as if she had no idea I'd overheard her betrayal. The night before we left for Silver Lake, a message summoned me, not to Kael's study, but his private quarters. I hesitated at the door, my pulse uneven. Arya opened it before I could knock, her expression tight. Good. You're here. We have a problem. Inside, Kael stood by the fireplace, tension rolling off him in waves. When he turned toward me, I saw something close to relief on his face. My mother's missing, he said flatly. She was supposed to meet with the elders this afternoon. She never arrived. The words hit me like a blow. You think she's part of the Red Claw? I asked. Dread curling in my stomach. Arya's voice dropped to a whisper. It makes sense. She opposed every reform Kael tried to pass. She's close with the traditionalists, and she's had full access to everything: security routes, council plans. And she knew Ash's schedule the day of the fire, I added quietly. Silence thickened. The possibility hung between us like a blade. If Kael's mother had orchestrated an attack on her own grandson, the betrayal was almost too horrific to name. We leave for the council meeting at dawn, Kael said, finally. Security's doubled. Riven will stay here with Ash and a full team of enforcers. I should stay too, I offered. To protect him. Kael shook his head. No. I need you with me, Lyra. Your instincts have saved us before, and if Nera's part of this, she'll expect to see you beside me. The heroic Omega the Alpha favors. Our eyes met long enough for something unspoken to burn between us. Arya must have sensed it. She looked away with a faint, knowing smile. I'll check the final security report, she said softly. You two should rest. Tomorrow will test us all. When the door closed behind her, the room went still. I never thanked you properly, Kael said at last. His voice had softened, not just for saving Ash, but for everything since. You've risked your life for a pack that once turned its back on you. Not all of them did, I said gently. Just a few. He stepped closer, the firelight catching in his eyes. When this ends, when Ash is safe and the threat is gone, there are things we need to talk about. My heartbeat stumbled. What things? He smiled faintly, his voice barely a whisper. Like why I can't stop thinking about you. Why in the middle of this chaos? I'm distracted by how the light touches your hair. Or how your scent steadies me when everything else falls apart. I forgot how to breathe. What about Arya? I managed. Regret shadowed his expression. She knows. She's known for days. She's stronger than people realize. I don't understand, I whispered. He reached up slowly, brushing a stray strand of hair from my face. Sometimes fate has other plans than the ones we make Lyra. Sometimes it puts the right people together when the world is falling apart. Before I could reply, a sharp knock shattered the moment. Riven burst through the door, face pale with urgency. We've got a problem, he said. 2 enforcers are missing from their posts, and Nyra has vanished from the pack house. The air changed instantly. Kael straightened the Alpha, re-emerging in full force. Lock down the estate, he ordered, his voice a blade. No one leaves. Not tonight. No one enters or leaves without my direct command. Kael ordered, his tone sharp enough to cut steel. Double the guards outside Ash's room. Riven nodded once and vanished down the corridor, already barking orders. When Kael turned back to me, the tenderness from earlier was gone, replaced by the cold precision of an Alpha preparing for war. Get some rest, he said. We leave at dawn. That night, sleep never came. I stood by the window, moonlight, spilling across the floorboards, staring out at the same wild forest where, just a week ago, I'd lived as an exile, unwanted, forgotten. Now I was standing in the center of a storm that could change everything. The Alpha trusted me. Maybe. He even cared for me. It all felt unreal, like waking from one life into another I didn't yet understand. My fingers brushed against my mother's silver pendant. Even in your darkest night, I whispered, the moon still watches. Dawn came far too quickly. Our convoy sped through the mist-draped road towards Silver Lake territory. Kael sat beside me in the lead car, his expression carved from stone, flanked by armed enforcers, Jax, Ronan, and Cade, eyes sharp for any sign of danger. The council meeting was being held in Silver Lake's Grand Lodge, a sprawling log fortress overlooking the mirror-like waters below. Wolves from all allied packs guarded every entrance, their ranks tense with suspicion. Remember the plan, Kael murmured as we neared the final checkpoint. Stay close. Watch for Nyra or anyone tied to her. Inside, the great hall buzzed with uneasy formality. Delegates from 12 regions filled the space. Thane, the austere Alpha of Blue Mountain, council members in ceremonial attire, and Arya standing beside her father Corvin, both offering curt nods as Kael and I entered. But beneath the murmur of greetings, something felt wrong. My skin prickled. The air itself seemed charged. Then I saw her. Nyra standing near a side door, feigning calm, but her eyes darted alert, waiting. I reached out and touched Kael's arm, tilting my head ever so slightly. He followed my gaze and gave the smallest signal to his guards. The explosion of chaos that followed seemed to tear time apart. The side doors slammed open, and a pack of wolves stormed in, led by a man I thought long dead. Darius Draven, Kael's father, the former Alpha, who had cast me out, strode into the hall like a ghost from another life. Behind him came Saris, her face alight with fanatic triumph. For the Red Claw, she shouted. For the old ways, pandemonium broke loose. Guards surged forward. Delegates screamed. and I lost sight of Kael in the crush of bodies. Panic clawed at me as I fought through the crowd, desperate to reach him. I found him finally, Kael standing face to face with his father in the center of the hall. Darius's features were harder now. Older, but his eyes burned with the same ruthless conviction. "You've weakened the bloodlines with your delusions," Darius spat. "Equality between ranks, alliances with outsiders. You've forgotten what it means to be a wolf." Kael's reply was calm steel wrapped in quiet fire. "No father." I remembered what strength truly means: unity, loyalty, compassion, weakness. Darius roared, lunging. A silver-edged dagger flashed in his hand, the kind that could kill even an alpha. I didn't think, I just moved. The blade sank into my side before Kael could reach me. The pain was blinding, a rush of fire spreading through my ribs. I heard Kael's roar, raw, an animal before darkness swallowed the world. The last thing I saw were enforcers tackling Darius to the ground, Sarah screaming as she was dragged away. Lyra Kael's voice cut through the fading light. "Stay with me. Please stay with me." Then everything went silent. When I opened my eyes again, moonlight poured across a whitewashed ceiling. The scent of antiseptic herbs filled the air. I was in the healing ward. My torso was wrapped in tight bandages, and beside the bed, Kael sat slumped in a chair, asleep. His hand gripping mine as if letting go would undo the world. He stirred when I moved, green eyes snapping open, disbelief and relief warring across his face. Then he lifted my hand to his lips, his voice breaking. "You almost died," he said hoarsely. "You took the blade meant for me. What happened?" I managed to whisper. "It's over," he said. "The Red Claw's done. My father and mother are in custody, Nyra too. The council stands united behind the alliance now." His voice trembled for the first time since I'd met him, and as he looked at me, I realized the war might be ending, but our story was only just beginning. "Ash," I whispered, my throat still raw. Kael's lips curved in a faint smile. "Safe," he said softly. "He keeps asking for you, every hour. He started calling you his moon lady." A weak smile tugged at my lips. "Because of the pendant, maybe." Kael's expression shifted, turning thoughtful, then intense. "Or maybe because he already senses what I've known since the night you ran into the fire for him. What I should have realized long before." My pulse quickened. "What's that?" He leaned closer, eyes locking with mine, voice barely above a whisper. "That you were meant to be my Luna, Lyra, our Luna." The world seemed to still around us, my breath caught somewhere between disbelief and longing. "Kael," I began, but he shook his head, his gaze unwavering. "If you'll have me," he said quietly. I thought of everything that had brought me to this point. The rejection that had scarred me, the fire that could have killed me, the blade I'd taken meant for him. Every heartbreak, every risk, every night spent wondering if I'd ever belong. It had all led to this moment. "The pack will never accept an Omega as Luna," I whispered, my voice trembling with the fear I hadn't dared to admit. "They already have," he said gently. "Your courage, your loyalty, the way you throw yourself into danger for others without hesitation, these are the marks of a Luna. Not rank, not blood, heart." Outside the moon hung full and luminous, bathing the room in silver light. It had watched me through every trial, every lonely night. But for the first time I felt it shining on something new, the promise of dawn. Yes, I breathed, tears stinging my eyes. I reached for his hand and squeezed it weakly. "I'll be your Luna." Kael's smile broke through the dimness like sunrise over snow. Warm, fierce, filled with everything we hadn't said aloud. When his lips met mine, the kiss was soft but deep. A vow more binding than words. And in that heartbeat I knew I had found my place at last. Not as a rejected Omega, not as a forgotten outcast, but as the Luna who ran through fire and found her way home.